So very briefly, I'm just going to mention there are some major reasons for pursuing a graduate degree. It gives you more time to mature as an individual. It gives you more time to mature as a professional and figure out what it is exactly you want to be doing in your career. It does give you a lot of options. And there are a number of students who will go and work for a few years and then come back to graduate school as a way to maybe seek a change in the industry or profession that they're doing, to learn about new technologies, or in order to gain a competitive advantage or to get a promotion, opportunities for advancement. If anyone in this session is interested in a PhD, I will just note that a master's can be a very good first step before you commit to a PhD. You need to really love your research and the topic that you're working on. And PhDs are primarily for people who want to pursue a career in academia or senior leadership. When it comes to weighing your options, master's degrees can range everywhere from 1 year, super specialized intensive programs, to 3 years if you're doing some research, for example, things that may take a bit of extra time. PhDs are usually done in 4 to 5 years. In engineering and applied science, they can sometimes be done a bit faster, maybe 3 years, if you're doing the master's and PhD together. Your master's gives you more of a specialized training in a very specific area because it's very career oriented, where your PhD is more about fellowships and assistantships. It's research oriented. It's focused on sort of expanding your overall knowledge. And at the end of it, the idea is that you yourself are creating knowledge, where the PhD is about the sort of contribution to the world when it comes to knowledge and expertise. The master's degree can be a bit less time and money, but can be a great credential for helping you to advance. A couple of other quick statistics about reasons for pursuing a graduate degree. This is information about the average salary by discipline for 2020. And you can see that for every degree that's achieved, from a bachelor's to a master's to a PhD, your earning potential goes up significantly. We actually had a faculty member in electrical and computer engineering who did an analysis that showed that master's students will make more than $1 million over the course of their working career, as opposed to someone who has only a bachelor's degree. Likewise, and I will note that this data is from September of 2019, your chances of unemployment are also decreased. So you can see here that for every degree someone holds, their chances of unemployment go down. So in summation, lower chances of unemployment, higher earning potential. So then how do you know if graduate school is going to be a good fit for you? So you start by doing a personal assessment. First, why do you want to pursue a graduate degree or a graduate degree in STEM? Is this because you're really wanting to make sure that you're able to advance a bit further, you're wanting to do more upper level positions instead of an entry level position? Why is it that you're interested in this? Likewise, you need to consider, is a graduate degree necessary for your field? I often tell students that they should look at job descriptions, not for the job that they want right now, but for the job they may want in 5 years, and see if that position requires a master's or a PhD, to then better ascertain whether the advanced degree is really necessary in their field. You also need to think about what you offer a program. And I think that this is something a lot of students forget about. It's not just about reaching all the right scores and being able to get in and what a program offers you. It's also about your unique experiences that you're going to bring in. We were talking with the EducationUSA staff earlier about the number of students from Korea at Binghamton. And part of what we're very proud of at Binghamton is the number of countries represented in our undergraduate and graduate students. In the Watson School alone, there's over 50 countries represented. And all of those students are coming from different educational backgrounds, different university experiences, different projects and exams. And so they're able to bring very unique perspectives into the classroom, which enriches and betters the experience of everyone in the class. And I think this year, more than ever, one of the questions that you have to consider is now the right time for you to go to graduate school? If you're coming to the United States for a master's degree, you're probably looking at a commitment of 2 years. If you're unsure of kind of what's going on in your personal life or your family life in that period, this could be a very big commitment. I know that we've had students at Binghamton who have missed when maybe someone was getting engaged or big celebrations. We've also had people who, while in graduate school have gotten married. And so you just have to sort of be thinking about yourself and what's going to be a good fit for you so far as the timing. Is now a good time based on your professional credentials? Is it better to maybe advance in your company a bit more, or is this what you would need in order to continue? So again, just want to do a bit of a personal assessment. You also have to be mindful of deadlines and timelines. And this is not just the application deadlines, but also the time it's going to take for all the additional pieces of the application. We'll be talking about those pieces in more detail in a little while, but you want to make sure that you're giving yourself time to study for exams like the GRE or GMAT or any English proficiency exams, TOEFL, IELTS, PTE, things like that. And if you're going to do any test preparation courses, you have to make sure you allow time for that as well. Right now, a big question that we're getting at Binghamton is that our applications are still open for fall 2020. But we have international students reaching out to ask if there's still going to be time for them to get the visa for fall 2020. And I would say that currently there probably is time if you're able to get the application in quickly. And we send out the I-20 because I-20s are going out electronically right now. But in the coming weeks, that window will likely be getting tighter and tighter, more difficult for a student to go through the full process in order to enroll for the fall. So you have to be mindful of these deadlines and timelines as you're planning out your intention for graduate or undergraduate study. So how to search for a graduate program? First and foremost, fit is key. If you're looking for a university that has a Master's of Science or a Master's of Business Administration, for example, there are literally tens of thousands of them just in the United States and probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, around the world. And so you need to figure out what university is going to be the best fit for you. And there's a lot of factors there, whether it's on campus or online, full-time or part-time, a degree program that is going to give you some flexibility versus one that has to be done all at once. And you have to figure out what fits best for you. One way you can do that is to talk to your faculty. There's also a lot of other resources for you, including the EducationUSA office, which is hosting this session. But I really encourage students to talk to their faculty because they will know where other students have gone and been successful and had good experiences at their university. Additionally, I encourage you to make a list of programs in your particular field. Normally, when we do this session in person, I show an Excel spreadsheet where you can track the name of the university, the requirements that they have, their deadlines, so everything is all together and you're able to stay on top of those deadlines and timelines, as I mentioned, but also ensure that you know what's expected for each of those different applications. You may include in this list where the university is located, or if it's something that you can do online. There's lots of factors that you're going to want to consider, and you can make those criteria based on what's of importance to you. One thing I just want to mention, while we're talking about STEM programs, yes, that means science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But when we're talking about it from an international student perspective, this has a very particular meaning, which is how the US State Department has certified the program. So if you're coming to the United States for a STEM program, currently, if you graduate, you're able to do 3 years of OPT in the United States working at a company, as opposed to only 1 year of OPT if you graduate from a non-STEM program. So this is part of why there's a big emphasis on STEM. We try to make sure that we let students know that we're a STEM program. But if in the course of your searching, you're not sure if a university is a STEM program, I would encourage you to reach out to their admissions office. They'd be able to tell you pretty quickly. Or you can always as well reach out to faculty within the department. But my experience has been that admissions teams tend to get back to you a bit more quickly because this is really their commitment, is to get back to you, make sure you have all the information you need. And so with that, a few pointers when you're contacting a program, whether it's undergraduate or graduate, STEM or non-STEM, there's a few things you can do to make sure that your communication is making the best impression. So first, I would say you want to make sure that you know who you're reaching out to. Again, my suggestion is to make sure you're connecting with an admissions office. So whether that's an office of graduate recruitment, a graduate school, a college's recruitment team, these should all be pretty easily identifiable on the university's website. And another pointer that I would say is that your initial email connecting with a staff person or a faculty member does not need to be multiple paragraphs, something like a statement of purpose. It can be very short. Just introduce who you are, ask what your question is, and then say that you look forward to continuing a conversation. I know that for me, it's a lot easier if I get a question from a student that says, you know, hi, I'm a prospective student for computer science, and I have these 3 specific questions. That's much easier to address than a very long email that the questions are sort of hidden within the text of the email, and so this can make things much easier. And a final pointer for contacting the program is that it is perfectly acceptable to follow up. I would say if you haven't heard a response within about a week, that it's good to follow up with whoever you reached out to, and if they're still not getting back to you, then try with someone else at the university. So when it comes to your application, we have some tips for you from our graduate directors. We asked them what they would like prospective students to know. And first and foremost, they suggest that you do not apply to only one program. You want to make sure that you give yourself options. Part of why this is so important is that meeting the minimum requirements does not guarantee admission. At the very beginning of this presentation, you saw a denotation that Binghamton University is the most selective of the SUNY schools. What that means is that we get the highest number of applications, but then have one of the lower numbers of intake. And that's because we have really high criteria. And even within that, we have a lot of students who meet all of the criteria, have necessary test scores, have good letters of recommendation, things like that. And so then it's just having to sort of rank order those students and let in the top students. So you just need to be mindful that just because you meet the requirements does not mean that you're definitely going to receive an admission decision. And going back to my earlier point, your application should not be your first contact with the department, especially if you have any kind of special case. Maybe your GRE scores are slightly lower than the requirement, or you have some work experience and are wondering if that qualifies you for any special exceptions in the application. You want to make sure that you've reached out to someone so that when your application comes through, they say, oh yes, I remember this person, and they're able to give a more tailored review of your application. So when it comes to applying to graduate school in the United States, there are a few major pieces of the application that you're going to find at most universities. First, an online, or in very rare cases, paper application, where you're going to be entering in things like your name and address, contact information, things like that. You're going to need to submit scores. This includes your GPA, as well as official test scores. So for most graduate programs, this would be a GRE, especially if you're looking at a program in STEM, particularly engineering or computer science. The GRE score is typically what's needed. A GMAT would be if you're looking at something in business administration. MCAT is for students looking at medical school, and ADAPT is for students looking at dental school. So as you can see from this, different types of universities and applications will have slightly different requirements, even with regard to the test that you're needing to take. And international students will also need to submit English proficiency scores. So at Binghamton and many universities, you can submit TOEFL or IELTS, and some universities will also accept PTE, which is a Pearson exam. And all of these currently are also having some online offerings due to the COVID outbreak. I would say if you're looking at applying for fall 2020 or even spring 2021, it's good to reach out to the school to see if their requirements have been adjusted at all in response to COVID. So for example, Binghamton University is now accepting Duolingo as an English proficiency score, which is something that we had not done before. But because it is available online, we wanted to make that piece more accessible. You will also need to submit all of your university transcripts. Whether they need to be official or unofficial will depend on the university that you're applying to, so that's something else to be mindful of. Most universities are going to require a personal statement. For STEM programs, if you're applying for a master's degree, this doesn't need to be especially long, 1-2 pages maximum. If you're looking at a PhD, it still doesn't need to be super long, but it will probably have more detail about your research aspirations, connections to faculty, things of that nature. We'll be talking about that piece in a little bit more detail in just a minute. And then you're also going to need to submit your resume or CV and letters of recommendation, the number of which will depend on the university you're applying to, and any program-specific materials. So if you're looking to apply to a school of journalism or anything with like English literature, things like that, you're probably going to need to submit a writing sample. If you're looking at a program in the fine arts, especially, then you're probably looking at submitting a portfolio, things like that. So you just need to make sure that you are mindful of all of the application materials required from each university that you're looking at. When you're looking at a personal statement, and I will just note that this is sometimes called a statement of purpose or a statement of research. Different universities call it different things, but pretty much what you need to do here is demonstrate that you know about the department, its faculty and its research, and that you've done your homework, essentially, that you're able to clearly show how the program's curriculum, faculty, and educational objectives align with your own personal and career goals. This would also be a great place if you've spoken with any faculty in the department or even staff at the university to mention those connections. And you want to make sure that you're sort of reflecting a balance between really well-defined goals, but still an openness to explore other avenues as well. One other thing that you want to be mindful of here is that sometimes there are things going on within the department or university or the wider field that you don't know about. So if you say in a statement of purpose, for example, that you want to work with this one faculty member because they're the only person who's working in the area you're interested in, but then unknown to you, that faculty member is planning to retire, for example. Well, then in that instance, the department would look at your application and say, well, they only want to work with this faculty member, and that faculty member is leaving. So again, this is why it's important to be in touch with the department in advance. But then as you're working on these personal statements, it's good to be able to give yourself that bit of flexibility in case there are any changes going on at the university or the particular department you're applying to. With regard to your resume or CV, I would highly recommend that you have it reviewed by career services or a faculty member that you work with, maybe an advisor at your university or office. I would say if you do not yet have a resume or CV, there are, of course, just hundreds of thousands of templates that you can find online. One specific recommendation that I would make is that the Watson School of Engineering has discipline-specific resume templates on our website. And I will also note here, in case you don't have time to write down the URL, that we will be sending a PDF of this PowerPoint to everyone, so you'll have access to this later for your review. But just a quick look at an example. So this is an example of a junior level or a third year BME biomedical engineering resume. So you can see that this resume has the name of the student at the very top. All of their contact information is easily identifiable. There's an education summary, as well as a listing of their technical skills that are important to the discipline, a summary of professional experiences, including formal jobs, internships, any freelance work that they've done, highlighting major tasks. They also list any leadership positions or experience that they have, and informal employment is listed at the bottom. This is just an example. It's just a template. It also probably looks different than many resumes that you've seen in Korea, and that's perfectly fine. most of the faculty and departments that you're going to be looking at are used to looking at international resumes. And so I would encourage you not to worry too much. This is just an example in case you don't have anything that you've started yet and you need a place to work from. With regard to letters of recommendation, lots of students worry about who it is that they should ask for these. You know, do I ask a faculty member? Do I ask my supervisor at work? Is it okay to get just a friend to write a letter of recommendation? So for this, I would say that if you are a current student or you've graduated in the last year or so, that at least one of your letters of recommendation should come from a faculty member. But of course, if you're someone who graduated 5 years ago, it may not make sense to have a faculty member write that letter unless you've really stayed in touch with them, because 5 years have gone by, you know, they've been dealing with lots of other students, you've advanced professionally and personally. And so if they're not able to write a good letter of recommendation for you, then that's not something to worry about. You can always get somebody else. If you are a working professional, I would encourage you to get your current supervisor to write a letter of recommendation if possible. I understand that, you know, you may not have notified your supervisor that you're looking at leaving the company to go on for a graduate degree, and that's totally fine. Binghamton University is pretty flexible with regard to who the letters of recommendation come from. Some universities, some departments can be less flexible. So again, it's always good to make sure that you're in touch with the department in advance so that you know what's expected. When to ask is also a big question. I would say that ideally you want to give somebody at least 1 month notice to say, you know, it's 1 month before the deadline, can you please write me a letter of recommendation? But I would recommend that at the absolute minimum, you give 2 weeks notice. We've all had experiences where as a student or a working professional, you know, other things come up. And so you want to make sure that you're allowing a bit of free time there in case the person you've asked for a letter of recommendation loses track of time or gets pulled away by other projects, so that those are still getting submitted on time. And then what are you asking for? So you want someone who can really speak to your intellectual potential as well as their time working with you, whether that's in the classroom or a laboratory. And so when it comes to these letters of recommendation, you know, someone's title is much less important than the quality of what they're going to be able to say about you. So if you've worked with, let's say, for example, you could request a letter of recommendation from the senior leadership of your university. But if you haven't worked with them and they don't know you, they're probably not going to be able to write a very good letter of recommendation. Whereas if you ask just a regular faculty member, someone you've taken multiple classes with and who knows you, they'll be able to more clearly say how graduate school fits into your potential and everything that you can contribute to that. And then one final note that I will make here is I would strongly encourage you not to draft your own letters of recommendation, just because this is an issue that comes up sometimes. And some universities have really strict policies about if you've written your own letter of recommendation, your application may be denied, things like that. So I would just say to avoid that altogether and do not draft your own letter of recommendation. A couple of final special notes for international students. So some schools will require additional materials from you, so you want to make sure that you're checking those requirements. For example, a copy of your passport page so that they can issue visa documents, things like that. And additionally, if you have received a degree from a US institution, you may be able to have your English proficiency requirements waived for your graduate school application. This would also be true at the undergraduate level for students who have maybe attended an international high school or have studied overseas. So you just want to make sure you're checking on that requirement in advance so that you can take advantage of it if possible.